There's a nursing home in Providence, Rhode Island, where the staff calls families when a cat lies down. Not when the doctor gives the word, when the cat does. His name is Oscar. He was adopted as a kitten to be a therapy animal at the Steer House Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, a place where people go when they're not coming back. Most of them have severe dementia. Most of them will die in that building. Oscar is not a friendly cat. Most days he ignores everyone. He walks through the halls, passes room after room, barely glances at the patients. But every so often, Oscar stops. He walks into a room he normally passes, jumps onto the bed, curls up next to someone, and stays. Within 2 to 4 hours, that person is dead. He's done this over 50 times. Dr. David Dosa, a geriatrician at Brown University, published Oscar's case in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2007. 50 correct calls, more accurate than the attending physicians, more consistent than any monitor in the building. The staff stopped questioning it. When Oscar lies down next to you, they call your family. So here's the question that should bother you more than it does. Do animals actually know when you're dying? Or are they just following a smell they don't understand? Let's start with what your body does when it begins to shut down. When cells die, they don't just stop, they leak. Volatile organic compounds, ketones, dimethyl disulfide, putrescine, gases that seep through your skin and ride on your breath. You can't smell them, you can't feel them leaving, but they're leaving. A joint study by the FBI, the University of Tennessee, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory found that a human body in the process of dying produces over 400 of these compounds. 400 chemical signals, broadcasting from your body before you or anyone around you knows what's happening. To you, they're invisible. To a dog or a cat, they're deafening. A dog's nose contains roughly 300 million olfactory receptors. Yours has 6 million. The part of their brain that processes smell is proportionally 40 times larger than yours. In 2024, a clinical trial published in Scientific Reports tested trained dogs on breath samples from nearly 1,400 cancer patients: breast, lung, prostate, colorectal. The dogs identified the cancer with roughly 94% accuracy. 1 drop of blood diluted in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and a dog can find it. That's not intuition. That's engineering. So Oscar isn't psychic. He's reading a chemical story your body writes as it shuts down. A story that starts hours before anyone in a white coat knows the ending. It's not a sixth sense. It's a nose operating on a scale you can't imagine, picking up a signal you don't even know you're sending. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Other animals detect death too. They just don't respond the way Oscar does. An ant has a brain the size of a grain of salt, and it knows when something near it has died. In the late 1950s, the biologist E.O. Wilson at Harvard discovered that when an ant dies, its body releases oleic acid within hours. The moment a living ant detects that chemical, it picks up the body and carries it to a waste pile. Wilson tested it. He painted oleic acid on a live ant, healthy, walking, very much alive, and its own nestmates picked it up and carried it to the dump. It kicked the entire way. Didn't matter. The chemical said dead, so dead it was. To an ant, death isn't an event. It's a missing broadcast. When the signal that says I'm alive stops playing, you're waste. Scale that brain up, and the response changes in ways nobody predicted. In 2015, a researcher named Kaylee Swift at the University of Washington studied what happens when a crow finds a dead crow. They gather, dozens of them, sometimes hundreds, circling, calling out in alarm, landing on nearby branches. For years, scientists called these crow funerals. Swift proved they're not funerals. They're threat briefings. The crows aren't mourning. They're scanning the area, memorizing every detail, especially the face of any human nearby. After a single encounter with a dead crow, the living crows recognized and scolded that specific human for over 6 weeks. One look, 6 weeks of memory. And here's the part that should sit with you. The first thing a crow does when it sees one of its own dead on the ground is look up at you, because in most cases, you're the reason it's there. Ants detect death and remove it. Crows detect death and investigate it. But in 2003, in Kenya's Samburu National Reserve, an elephant did something that neither chemistry nor threat assessment can account for. A matriarch named Eleanor collapsed in the afternoon sun. Within minutes, an elephant from an entirely different family, a female named Grace, rushed to her side and tried to lift her with her tusks. Eleanor couldn't stand. Grace kept pushing, long after it was clear nothing would work. Eleanor died that night. Over the next week, elephants from 5 separate families came to stand over her body. They touched her with their trunks. They rocked in place. Some stayed for hours. Ian Douglas Hamilton, founder of Save the Elephants, documented the entire vigil and published it in Applied Animal Behavior Science in 2006. None of these elephants were Eleanor's close kin. They came anyway. No chemical signal drew them in. No threat to assess. They just stood there, over something that wasn't coming back, and none of them left until they were ready. Now, the skeptic has a fair point. Confirmation bias is real. You remember the time your dog lay next to your grandmother the night before she died? You forget the 200 nights it lay next to her while she was fine. And Oscar, maybe he liked warm rooms. Dying people don't move much. That's a comfortable bed for a cat that doesn't like being bothered. Maybe the whole thing is pattern recognition plus coincidence plus the very human need to find meaning in a room where someone just stopped breathing. Fair. Except Oscar didn't choose random still people. He chose correctly 50 times, over 5 years, in a building full of people who barely moved at all. And the dog in India had no warm room. This is where the science reaches for something it can't quite hold. In 2021, the philosopher Susana Monsó and her colleague Antonio Osuna Mascaro published a paper in Synthes that quietly reframed the entire debate. Their argument was that we've been asking the wrong question. We keep demanding whether animals understand death the way we do. The philosophy, the permanence, the dread. Monsó called that intellectual anthropocentrism. We set the bar at human height, then act surprised when nothing else clears it. What she proposed instead was a minimal concept of death. Just 2 things. Non-functionality. It stopped moving, stopped eating, stopped responding. And irreversibility. It's not coming back. You don't need language for that. You don't need a theory of mortality. You just need to notice that something that was here isn't anymore, and that no amount of waiting will change it. By that measure, a lot of animals understand death. They just understand it quietly, without the words we keep insisting on. We mapped the chemical, we timed the vigil, but between the scent and the staying, that distance, whatever lives in it, we don't have a tool for that yet. In January 2026, 2 cousins named Bikshit Rana and Piyush left for a trek near the Parmani Temple in Parmoor, a remote stretch of the Indian Himalayas. They brought a camera. They brought Piyush's pit bull. They didn't bring enough gear for what came next. The weather turned without warning. A snowstorm buried the trail, the landmarks, everything. Both of them died in the cold. When the State Disaster Response Force reached the area 4 days later, they found Piyush's body under layers of snow. His dog was sitting on top of it. 4 days. Temperatures below -20°C. Wild animals in the surrounding forest. No food, no water, no shelter, no one coming. The dog hadn't moved, it hadn't eaten, it had no training for this. No evolutionary incentive to guard a body that would never feed it again, never warm it again, never call its name again. It just stayed. The rescue team had to carry the dog out. It wouldn't walk away on its own. Every species on this planet has a protocol for death. Ants detect it and haul it to the dump. Crows detect it and memorize who caused it. Elephants detect it and stand over the body for days. But dogs do something harder to explain. They detect it and lie down next to it. A brain the size of a grain of salt removes the body. A bird brain files a threat report. The largest land brain on Earth stands guard over what it already lost. And a dog just sits in the snow beside something it can't help and won't leave. In 4.5 billion years of life on this planet, only one species reliably does that with yours. Not because it understands what's happening, not because anyone trained it to. And you're the only species that sits here wondering whether they feel it the way you do. That's not nothing either. Somewhere in a nursing home in Rhode Island, a cat that doesn't like anyone is curled up next to the person who needs him most. Somewhere in a snowfield in India, a dog is still sitting where its owner fell. We put them down when they're sick. They sit with us when we go. It can't know what dying means. It stays anyway.